Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Nicole Balm, who serves as Senior Director of Education and Community Engagement of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron. It's great to be here.
Well, so I am so excited for this, and obviously the Toronto Symphony is one of our great creative partners at Arts Engines, helped us, of course, co-curate this show. And one of the things is that a lot of people who watch the show are either at orchestras or other, arts institutions, and thinking about both how they relate to their community, but also everyone, has a role that somehow relates to community engagement or connecting with the community. And I was just wondering if you could kind of share, what does that kind of mean to you when you think about that and both the Toronto Symphony's role in the community and the role of the arts in community? Just wondering if you could kind of share with us, what your kind of philosophy, ethos, priorities are with that.
Yeah, so I think the work that I do at the Toronto Symphony, I have the pleasure of overseeing all of our educational community programming, but under that umbrella falls our youth orchestra programming, our school concert series, family series, and a number of community partnerships and programs. And within that falls both some very broad programming, so like our school concert series, which reaches over 37,000 students per year, but also some very narrow and deep programming. So like our youth orchestra, which spends an entire year with 85 young musicians learning alongside TSO musicians, or other programming such as the Art of Healing program, which works with about a dozen mental health patients over the course of a year. So it varies from that more broad-based community engagement to very kind of deep community engagement. But across all of that, we see kind of the same intentions and priorities reflected in all of those initiatives. So, making orchestra more accessible, making it fun, making music education an interesting and accessible experience for young people who may not have that access through their local schools. And just providing that introduction to people from whatever corner of the world they're coming from. It really comes back to the central principle of, everyone has a musical identity within themselves. They're born with some sort of musical identity, whether that's your own heartbeat or the music you curate for yourself on Spotify, or even the way that you present yourself in conversation through your voice tone. And so it's up to us to tap into that identity in whatever possible way we can in order to welcome people over to us at the TSO.
Well, it's just, it's wonderful. And I loved how you kind of shared about the breadth and that, you both have these kind of broader programs and then the in-depth programs. And as you kind of think about that, we all, in our sector need funding for the work that we're doing, which is so critically important. And oftentimes I know that, many who watch the show are like, we're trying to make the case, but in our community, there are also housing issues and access to healthcare issues and other issues. And oftentimes they're seeking to say, so how do we make the case as it relates to our work? And just wondering if you've had any, kind of experiences like that and kind of thinking about that role of the arts and the importance of the arts for the community and especially for the Toronto community.
Yeah, that's a super good question. And I think it comes back to the way that we think about a person's health and a person's well-being. And this idea that in order to be healthy and in order to be well, it takes more than just having those basic needs being met, right? A person's well-being is made up of their social, their emotional, and their practical needs. And while housing, food, all of that can be met through those basic needs, the arts and music is able to step in and support those other needs. And so we really lean into that side of things, and thinking about the ways in which music can serve a whole person. So just this past year, we partnered with the Center for Addiction and Mental Health here in Toronto to launch a new program called The Art of Healing, which brought together Indigenous and non-Indigenous patients with an Indigenous composer and TSO musicians to work over a number of months on co-creating a piece of music that was reflective of their healing journeys, and to, express themselves through that in a different way than they had otherwise been able to do in their lives, in their healing, and in the traditional ways that medicine has been able to tap into themselves. So it was a space where you don't have to share your diagnosis. It's not therapy. You're not there to talk about the challenges and traumas of your life, but you're there to talk about the way that music has impacted you and the way that music has connected you. And as a result, it created kind of this shared sense of belonging amongst people of, this is something I care about, and I found other people who I had not yet been connected to through music. And I think that's where music is able to tap into, that overall sense of well-being in creating greater belonging, in connection, in reducing isolation or loneliness. That's where, music goes beyond what medicine can do.
I absolutely just love that, and the work that the TSO is doing in terms of incorporating, prioritizing this. It feels to me, music plays such a role on the main stage, but then in all of these different aspects of our communities, and it's such important work. One kind of additional aspect to this kind of, people also talk about just general accessibility to the music, to orchestras, et cetera. And just wondering if you kind of think about that. Obviously, you have all of these programs that are engaging and bringing young people into the fold, and then some of the work obviously relating to health and wellness and well-being, and the connection between music and health. And then is there any kind of aspects that you experience in Toronto of just where a lot of the general public may not feel like either the orchestra or the world or concerts are accessible, and is that part of that work as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I know this is a question that's, we're dealing with industry wide. And, I think about the city of Toronto, who's kind of uniquely positioned in that over half of the city is minority. And so when we think about creating access and opportunities, I think it really comes back to having those conversations and doing that listening and consultation with people and organizations who are on the ground serving those disparate groups, whether it's a certain demographic or an LGBTQ group or a disabled population, hearing firsthand what those needs are and where we can work to reduce barriers, or where we can reduce or increase access through various sticking points. So I think the crux of good community engagement is coming back to that listening and reflecting and recognizing the ways that things are changing over time. And specifically in Toronto, I mean, we've over the past couple of years done adapted our programming. For example, we did a reggae music concert out in Brampton, Ontario, which is Canada's fastest growing city. It has a 13% Caribbean Canadian population. And, we got together and said this would be a culturally relevant program that would make sense to be presenting in the Brampton community. And so we did that that last year as an intentional point. And then, looking ahead to this fall, and what we've done for a couple of years now is opening our doors at the start of the season for an open house, which is free and for anyone, all ages, who may have or have not had experience with the TSO or with music at all, to come in, experience performances by the TSO, by other community ensembles, to try out instruments, to be surrounded by musicians themselves, and to have the opportunity to connect with them. And so ultimately coming back and creating different points of entry for folks. Is it culturally relevant programming? Is it looking inward at ourselves to address the barriers that exist for folks, whether they be financial or perceived or otherwise, and then doing that listening and ongoing consultation?
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely extraordinary work, and the breadth to which you're doing it is just absolutely awesome. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask of all my guests, this work, well, clearly so rewarding and impactful for you, for the orchestra, for your community. There's got to be some tough days. And as an arts leader and as administrative leader, just wondering, are there any mechanisms or tools that you use for yourself when there's, great challenges or those kind of tough days that we all hit?
For sure. And there are those tough days. I think I have the great pleasure of being so close to the work that happens, and being able to see the impact firsthand that our musicians and artists are having with folks who've never experienced the TSO, or whose minds are being changed in some way, or who are having that healing impact that we talked about earlier. And so seeing that firsthand is really energizing, and that really makes up for some of those harder days. But I also think inwardly and look to the team of people that I have around me, the staff that I have, but also the colleagues that I work with, who are creative, and I know that you can lean on in those harder moments to have those conversations, to commiserate, but also to say, this is really hard. What's an idea that we can do to make this feel better, or to do it differently, and to ultimately put our heads together and focus a little bit differently. So I look back to my team in particular as a real highlight on some of those darker days.
Nicole Balm, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Aaron. It's been a pleasure.